Hello students, welcome back to the class. Today we are going to take up a lesson that is chapter number 16 of your English grammar textbook, which is active and passive voice. Okay, now before moving into the lesson, let us first see what is a voice. In grammar, the voice of a verb describes the relationship between the action that the verb expresses and the participant identified by its arguments. So a voice is a relationship shared between the action which is done performed by the subject or by the object upon the subject or the object. We all know that there are two kinds of voice, which is active voice and passive voice. So now let us see what is an active voice. A verb is in active voice when it tells us something that a person or a thing does. In other words, an active voice expresses an action performed by the subject. Now let us see the example given there. The peon brought a circular. Here in this sentence, the subject, the peon, does an action of bringing the circular. So this sentence or this is an active voice because it expresses an action which is performed by the peon, that is the subject. And the sentence also speaks about what the subject is doing. Okay, as we have learned what is an active voice, now let us move on with the passive voice. What is a passive voice? A verb is in passive voice when it tells us something that is done to a person or a thing. So, in other words, a passive voice expresses an action performed upon the subject. In active voice, the action is performed by the subject, but in passive voice, the action is performed upon the subject. That is the difference. Now, let us see the example. A circular was brought by the peon. Here, a circular is the subject, was brought is the verb, and then by the peon is the object. In this sentence, an action is done or performed upon the subject, that is a circular, by the object, the peon. So, this sentence is in a passive voice. Okay, now I hope you understand what is a passive voice and what is an active voice. So now there are some rules which we should always keep in mind. So in order to change active voice into passive voice correctly, so I'm going to give you some rules. So how to change active voice to passive voice? Rule number 1, object becomes subject. So before changing the voice of a sentence, first you have to identify the subject, the object, and the verb in the sentence. So here in the example, the child broke the vase. The child is the subject here, broke is the verb, and the vase is object. This is this sentence is in an active voice, so we have to change into a passive voice by making the object becomes the subject. So how do we change? The child is the subject, broke is verb, and the vase is the object. So while we change this active voice into passive voice, the vase needs to become the subject of the sentence. So we can change it like this. The vase was broken by the child. So the vase here becomes the subject, was broken, verb, and by is an agent. By the child which is the subject in the active voice becomes object in the passive voice. Okay, now the second rule we have here is subject becomes object and subject is shifted as by plus agent. So in the first rule, object becomes subject, and according to the second rule, subject becomes object, and the subject is shifted from its initial position to the object position by using by plus agent. Okay, now let us see the example. He checks all items. So he here is the subject, checks is verb, and all items is the object. And this sentence is in active voice. We have to change it into passive voice by making the subject become object and object becomes the subject. Object turns into subject and all items are. Be verb is used here. Check by him. By plus agent. The pronoun he is changed into him, and the active voice now becomes passive voice. All items are checked by him. Now let us see rule number 3 of how to change active voice to passive voice. Rule number 3. Verb changes into perfect tense form and the sentence takes the form be plus past participle. So in the previous lessons, I told you to learn by heart the sentence formation according to the different tenses. If you learn it by heart and if you still know what it is, this will not be difficult for you. So now the verbs changes into perfect tense, and then the sentence takes the form of be verb plus past participle. Example: Hina eats mangoes. Hina here is the subject, eats is verb, and mangoes object, and this sentence is in active voice. So now we have to change it into passive voice by changing the verb into its perfect tense. So the object mangoes becomes the subject now. Mangoes are eaten by Hina. Are is be verb and eaten is past participle. So in the rule it says that the sentence takes be verb plus past participle. So we are changing it into like mangoes are eaten by Hina. And now let me tell you what are be verbs. Be verbs indicate a state of being, and the verbs like is, am, are, was, were, been, and being are called be verbs. Okay, now let's see rule number 4. Rule number 4 says the verb changes in number to suit the new subject. So I would like to request you to recite what is the subject verb agreement once again. So in this rule, it is very essential that you have the knowledge of subject verb agreements. So let us see the example. Jatin takes 2 glasses of milk daily. This sentence is in active voice and we have to change it into passive voice. First, let us identify the subject, the verb, and object. The subject here is Jatin, and Jatin is singular. Next, verb here in this sentence is takes, and the verb here is also in singular number. And 2 glasses is the object of the sentence, and this object is in plural number. Okay, now let us change the active voice into passive voice, making the object, which is plural in number, the subject of the passive voice sentence. 2 glasses of milk are taken by Jatin. So according to the rule, the subject 2 glasses of milk now is in plural form, so the verb also needs to be in plural. So we are using are, which is the plural verb. And takes past participle form taken. 2 glasses of milk are taken by Jatin, which is now in passive voice. Here we are coming to the last rule of changing active voice to passive voice according to your standard. So rule number 5 says changes in models take place and the sentence takes the form be plus past participle. Models is the lesson which we covered or studied in the recent online class, and like frequently as I mentioned in the classroom, grammar is like mathematics. Without the knowledge of one particular lesson, to understand another lesson is like an impossible thing. So if you look at the rules of changing active voice to passive voice, how many lessons are being connected? You need to understand what is subject verb agreement, you need to know what is tense, you need to understand what are the forms of tenses according to forms of sentences according to different tenses and all, and what is a model, all this. So there is no particular lesson in grammar which you can neglect it. Let's see the example. Raju may give the book to his friend. You identify the subject, the object, the verb in the sentence. Raju is the subject, give is the verb of the sentence, and then the book is the object. And here we can see the use of modal, that is may. And this sentence is in active voice, and we have to change it into passive voice by applying the rules we had already been studying in the previous points. So we can change by making the object becomes the subject. The book may. So the rule number 5 particularly says that the sentence must take the form of be plus past participle. So be here is different from be verbs in rule number 3. Be here is just be. It is not a be verb. So we can change it like the book may be given. Given is the past participle form. Now the active voice is changed into passive voice in the following way. The book may be given to his friend by Raju. The object, the book, now becomes the subject. Use of may, model is here, still here, and then the use of be is included, and then past participle. The book may be given to his friend by Raju. And the rule number 5 is finished. That's all for today's lesson. I hope you can understand. And if you have any problem, if you can't understand any particular point, you feel free to contact me. Okay, you all stay home, do your duties properly, stay safe, and bye bye.